Okay, I'll start by sharing my screen. And seeing yourself. Okay, so tonight I would like to cover how to develop plugins for Godot Engine. This is gonna sound a bit more like software development, but since Godot is still a game engine mostly, it's kind of like uh, my premise here is that I would like to design the plugins the way I'm designing my game interfaces, that sort of thing. I'll try to keep it as short as possible because this topic could go for a while. Bit about me. I did web development for more than 15 years. And of last year, I started my own company, game studio. And I'm basically trying to transfer my knowledge from the web industry to the game industry. That's why I tend to tackle advanced topics like plugin development and other tools like that. So besides that, I'm developing an ambitious simulation game, which is going to use these like my own plugins. But I thought since I'm developing my own plugins, maybe other people out there might need a better workflow for their own game. So today's agenda will be how to create a plugin, and then we will look at the interface of the plugin and how we introduce it to Godot, and then maybe we can work out with other Godot systems. I'm going to be brave and do this live instead of slideshow. So here goes nothing. Nope, wrong Godot. Okay, this is the right Godot interface. So I have a basic project here. There's nothing going on except one plugin installed for us, which is a plugin refresher from Will Nations Dev. This is a super helpful plugin that while you are developing your own plugin, it basically helps you so that you don't have to come to this interface and enable and enable and disable your plugin each time you make an update. Your plugin name will be listed here so that you could just save your code and then refresh your plugin. So let's go and create our plugin. So this following this structure, yeah, we are right there. So this is how you create a plugin. That interface is accessed via project settings, create, and here is our first plugin credentials. So subfolder is going to be most likely the plugin name. Script name, the suggestion is that we type plugin GD. Do this, and all the rest is up to you. Let's actually call it Godot Toronto. That's it, and we want to activate it now. So we have officially created a plugin, except it's not doing anything and it's not really visible anywhere except we have access to its code. This is the refresher that I was talking about. From now on, we'll just make our changes and refresh it. So when we did this work, there is the plugin GD, but there's also another file that is created for us, which is this CFG file. You look inside this file. This is basically telling you that this plugin is going to start up with this script. If your plugin code requires a lot of scripts, and naturally it's going to require a lot of UI components, so maybe you want to break this folder down by a folder like scenes, another folder like scripts, and whatever. If you happen to push your script files into a scripts folder, you got to update this reference. Unfortunately, this CFG is not accessible within Godot, so this is the only thing maybe you have to keep in mind. This is sort of the kickoff file. That's that. Okay. So we've just created a plugin, and now let's move to designing the plugin, so the UI of this plugin. Now, this is a plugin that I'm using for my own game. You could be creating plugins as complex as this with multiple tabs interacting with the file system and other things. But this is essentially like designing game interface. So these are built-in UI components. Um, so let's just create the most basic UI component. We have an empty scene. Let's put this control here. Let's call it interface and maybe a button. Why not? Maybe we'll do something with this button soon. So let's call it push to button and save the interface scene into our plugin folder. This is when I was saying you could maybe create different folders. So this is done, but this is still not introduced to the Godot interface. So we'll do that in this GD file, same file that was created for you. Which brings us to the next slide. Where do you want to attach your plugin? This is perhaps an important decision because maybe this decision, you don't have to decide it right away, right from the beginning. You could be moving the location of your plugin later. But there, you got to be careful at some point, meaning there is this in this code, enter tree and exit tree, that there is some kind of like cleanup done for you in Godot. If you're right in the middle of sort of switching the location of your plugin, you may have to restart the engine so that it actually takes it away from the previous position so you could inject it in the new one. And then from that point on, it's going to actually do everything seamlessly. The reason why I'm saying that location might change initially, this Urban Farmer Tools plugin that I wrote, this used to be part of the bottom panel here. Because I needed a lot more room, I actually moved it here. So your plugin requires a vertical space, maybe you'll stick it into one of these dock areas, that kind of thing. So these are your options. So as I mentioned, bottom panel is most likely like, that's a very good start. You decide to put it into docs, you have 8 options. So there is this, I think the way they call it is, actually, let's just see it in the code so we can mix. So we are going to add our user interface control, the plugin sort of control itself, to one of these 3 options. So the bottom panel is expecting a control and a title. So it's going to populate it here. So let's start with this. We need the interface itself. Let's reload this interface. And you could instance this right away. Let's just stick that interface here under this title. And if you're adding control in enter tree, remember to clean it up when you're exiting. So I actually maybe stupidly copied it, but all I have to do is just maybe change it. So thing, except you don't need the string, perhaps something like this. Let's get rid of these past statements. So this should be good enough that when we hit the refresh plugin, we have our plugin displayed here. There was some kind of like bumping here. It actually put the interface for us, but it didn't know its minimum size. So it kind of put it there like as 1 pixel. This is just like any other game interface that you could decide its minimum size and all the other constraints. They work to a certain extent. Well, as you know, sometimes in game UI, the rest of the interface is limiting your options. You are bound by the same rules. But you could
So,
be, go ahead.
quick question. So I've kind of done this on my own for another project that I've been working on, and one of the issues that I had with this is actually getting the theming to
Mm-hmm.
match.
Yeah.
And I'm noticing right here that the theming is different. and it actually was breaking things because I had these kind of pixel perfect
Hmm.
layouts that would break. And so I ended up having to run not a plugin, but just like a Godot app that would do the thing I need, make the file, and put it where I want. Right. So is there any insight on that bit? Maybe that's for later, but it's just something that occurred to me. Is like that you're
Yeah.
getting the same thing that I was getting, where it looks way different than what my intention was, and it ended up breaking all kinds of things because like the spacing was all wrong, and
Yeah.
you know.
If your
But
UI needs to be pixel perfect, I would take a look at how you're designing your UI because it sounds like you're just doing something like with the wrong approach there.
yeah, I would say the same.
Um.
Yeah.
Well, not so much pixel perfect because I'm still using like H boxes and V boxes. Like I'm using the proper way of laying it out, but
Yeah.
it would like scrunch things up in a way the buttons wouldn't look right. You'd have overflows. Like it was just breaking horrifically. And I was trying to design the interface to look nice for my particular screen. Like the scaling doesn't work because it didn't match up, and like I thought it'd be easier to just have it match the Godot theme, right? Because then what you're editing is going to look like what it actually appears in the plugin, right?
Yeah. So right now this is using the editor theme, but you could assign your own theme, and it's going to follow your custom theme in your
Yeah, I didn't.
plugin. But here's the thing: if you are well, first of all, if you are doing this for your own sake, I don't think you should bother with a theme because it's just a plugin you use. If you are going to distribute this commercially, coming up with some colors and like design concern like that, that's a commercial thing that you are pushing. I mean, maybe not monetizing it, but even if it's open source, let's say, it's still going to look quite different than the interface for the sake of applying your own theme. So maybe it's better not to touch it, but what you are pointing out sounds like a different problem than a theming problem.
Yeah, maybe I'll
Yeah,
bring up my project and we could talk about it after then.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt.
sure.
Continue.
It's okay. So this is, as I was saying, like this is a very large area. Sometimes it makes sense to use the bottom area, but then you have options. You could be putting things into docs. So let's see that too. This is the time when, as I was mentioning, now that we have this interface edit to the bottom panel, if we start adding our UI to different parts, we may have to restart the engine because it doesn't actually trigger this right away. It kind of triggers this, then this, but at that point, the interface has already been added. So people should be aware of that because sometimes the behavior looks sort of weird. But these are your options in the dock slots. There is this left BL, which is on the left here, uh, bottom left, and then also on the left there is bottom right. So from my understanding, it means if you do left, bottom right, it adds it to the right of this file system. So if there's this area, the right of the bottom right of the left side of the dock. And then you could also do something like left, top right. It's going to edit here. So you have all these variations. So you could be adding it anywhere you want in these dock areas. You have
The
8 options.
default positions of the Godot docs are like the inner sides. So like the right of the left side and the left of the right side
Yeah,
are where the
yeah,
default docs are.
yeah,
So if you want your doc to be next to the default ones, it has to go left or right.
yeah, yeah. But again, it's kind of easy to like. It's not rocket science, right? You could do a few trials and errors, and then. But since you are the Godot Engine guy, you know the defaults. Um, so I'm not going to demonstrate this dock part because I think it's clear enough. This is maybe more interesting, and most people might want to try something fancy. This is where you could actually get fancy. Um, let's comment this one out so that we know we're not going to run it accidentally. Start with add control again. So we have already seen bottom panel. We have kind of addressed dock, and there is also the container part. So in the container part, so here are your options. So you could have the sort of one of the major groups is canvas editor. This is a fancy way of saying that when you edit, it's going to be visible when the 2D view is in focus. And here are your options if that's the case. Let me just put a pass here so that. So when you're in the canvas editor, you could put it in the bottom or in the menu or side, left side, right? What that means is, so let's look at these positional ones, bottom, side, left side, right? It's as if it divides this area, and if you say, okay, side left, it puts it somewhere here. I believe it automatically puts a divider, so you could actually adjust its size. And bottom is the same thing too. It puts a horizontal divider here and it puts it in the bottom. But don't confuse that bottom with the bottom panel. This is a separate area. What we are talking about is this viewport area for the 2D view. So the same story goes for other types. That so canvas editor. I'll actually address all of them. But let's look at the spatial editor. That's also another fancy way of saying it's the 3D editor. Same rules apply. And in between the spatial and the canvas editor, you have three options. You could be writing this plugin so that it is displayed in the project setting tab, left and right. It's basically this area. So I actually haven't tried anything like I have never put anything in this area. I'm not quite sure what tab left, tab right means, but I'm pretty sure it's going to inject something here. So again, you could be adding something to the project setting project. This property editor bottom, this property editor is essentially inspector. So maybe we could try this. We do this. Let's remember to put control on container. This, but I believe we need to find what we are putting. We have the same constraint here. Yeah. Let's try this. I'm kind of sure that this is going to be kept here, but we are going to trigger this line, which is going to add something here. And it did. This interface is a bit long, so I'm going to a bit short. Or maybe if I deselect something, could you guys see this? Push the button here in the inspector on the lower right.
I see.
Yeah. Okay.
Cut off a little bit, but
yeah. So today when I was testing this again, in one instance, it actually put it beautifully somewhere here. I don't know why it pushed it all the way down.
Maybe if you refresh it now.
Again, let me actually restart just in case, which is also going to clean the bottom part too. No, it's still there. Oh, I think I know why. Because this interface doesn't have a minimum size. That's what I was actually doing here. So if this is 300, refresh the plugin. So it actually occupies 300 pixels minimum size here, which still gives enough room for the. So you could be putting things here too. This is that. So we have covered properties, panel, canvas editor, spatial editor. There is we also mentioned project settings, and the last one is toolbar. This toolbar, I mean, we're already seeing a live example of it. When you edit to the toolbar, it adds it to this area. And same constraints apply. You gotta give a minimum width, so it actually pushes these things to the left. So that is another case. And of course, the big option, main screen. This means that you could actually show it with its own sexy icon. And that's exactly what I did with Urban Farmer Tools. This is one of the icons in the game. I actually put it here. So bringing your plugin to this kind of area is also easy, but it takes a few more function calls, and let's look at that. First of all, we will still have enter tree and exit tree, and let's keep those things there. One thing we have to do is we have to tell Godot that this plugin is now going to be on main screen or has main screen, so it's always true. I believe this is by default false. That's why other areas are prioritized. But this is going to force it to be here. That's number one. And we don't pass the instance of this interface around with a string name. In this case, we were typing a string name. Because that is not possible, we have to return the plugin name here. That is going to be value that we used. This is going to be displayed here. Similarly, we are going to get the plugins icon, and it is going to be, this part is a bit fancy, but this is actually in the documentation too. You could look this up. We are getting the editor interface, and there is going to be a base control there. And among base controls, let's say, this is actually letting you access the icons. I believe these are changing in Godot 4 because on Monday I looked at Godot 4 and all these plugins are not working because these paths are changing or have already changed in current latest version, let's say.
It is.
It is, right? So which disappointed me, but what can you do, right?
You're disappointed by things being better?
Yes, I'm hoping so. So let's put a spatial icon, and we are picking it from the editor icons. At this point, you could also do something like preload a PNG, and then that custom PNG is going to be your icon the way I did it here. So you could actually have your own icon. But let's go with the spatial icon. So what else we need? Has main screen okay, plugin name is okay. Oh, one last thing, which is also crucial. When your plugin is activated, either through a refresh here or you did it manually, whether this plugin triggers, like, is going to be visible right away, because all these things are kind of competing with each other. Meaning, you may have already noticed this behavior that when you're in the script view, if you click this control here, it takes you to 2D view. There's an internal mechanism that does that automatic switch for you. And if this was a 3D node, it would take you to 3D node. So there's, I don't know if there's an order of precedence here, but this make visible is basically saying that you don't want to make it visible all the time, meaning, first of all, if your interface exists, its visibility maybe is going to depend on whether this make visible is called explicitly. And I think once I make my case, it is going to be a bit more obvious. Normally, they suggest when you write this, you write false. But once you know that your interface is already active, so you can just change its visibility depending on maybe what you are doing here too. Just checking my notes. What else do I need? I, of course, have to now add this to this area. So we are going to need a special command similar to this. Is going to do the job. So let's disable all this. This is done by, in this case, we cannot rely on this. We have run out of these options here. We've already seen all of them. This is the part where we are gonna piggyback on editor interface again. So we are getting the whole interface itself. And here there is get editor viewport. This is the name that's surely changing Godot 4. I think they called it main control or something. Like there is a designated control name for this area. And we are essentially adding a child, which is our interface. And at this point, we say, well, when you edit, don't make it visible right away, just hide it. Because other things are going to fire first. Or that we kind of want, we want Godot to display one of these instead of our plugin. But I believe we could pass through here and then force it to be displayed too. And then here, this is something that I tried. This did not work. Because, I mean, this is tempting, right? Because we added a child, let's just remove it here. This did not work. Instead, here, we go about it this way. If interface exists, then we just free it. So this actually takes care of it for us. So let's see if this is going to run. We will ignore this. This has been added here. Gonna stay there. You refresh it, and here's our awesome plugins. And when we click, it's the interface that we've been designing here in the 2D view, but this is now our plugin in the main viewport. So now you can design full screen plugins. You could have your own, I don't know, maybe some kind of like a 3D model preview plugin, whatever you want to do. You have full access to the engine at this point. And it's not just down buttons. You could also write logic too. Let's actually write a script. I know that I'm going to need a label, so I'm going to change this to debux. Let's add a label. Label will be empty for now. Let's create this interface GD script, empty in the same folder. And we know we are going to push that button at some point, so let's bind it. And we just say, well, this labels text will be, I can type, okay, something like this. Now let's refresh our plugin, and I know 100% that this is not going to work, and I'll give you, if you guys know why it might not be working, go ahead, otherwise I'll tell you quickly. I won't let you suffer. This is supposed to work. We should see the text here. Any guess why it's not working? The answer is going to be in this file. I'm actually putting the fix right now on the first line. You have to make this to a tool. Yes. So this is going to work in the engine, not by itself. In sort of, this is not going to work in the compiled version, but in the engine context. So it has to be a tool. So when you do this and you refresh, go back to your plugin, push the button, and you are going to see the text. Now, by making that script a tool, you could run it like you're running a game. Everything about the scripts, about the engine, everything will work. You could be importing external files. You could be doing networking, multiplayer, all that stuff is going to be here. I mean, I'm really pushing the envelope. And this is all the other stuff you could be utilizing in your plugin script. This is already where we are. We are using an editor plugin, which is this. We are using editor plugin to write our plugin sort of binding code. At this point, this acts more like a normal script, but at this point, you also have access to all this stuff, which means you could be injecting the editor interface as a variable into your code. Show you what I mean by that. This script is part of this interface. So you could have some variable here waiting. This by itself doesn't have access to the editor interface. But when you are setting up your plugin, after you create this instance, at the time of adding it to your interface, you could be doing something like this is going to have editor interface, and here you can create, oops, you could be creating an instance of the editor interface, and you pass, basically you're just injecting a dependency. And by the same token, you could be utilizing other aspects of the editor. So this plugin could very well be utilizing maybe importer FBX, or maybe file dialog, things like that. So the possibilities are not just limited by your own UI, but everything in Godot is now available to you. So last words, caveats. So I already mentioned the cleanup. You gotta have this part taken care of. So you are either removing from containers or from the main panel. You have to free your asset. This is maybe not that crucial, like this is going to have memory leaks, but not removing from the interfaces and you are refreshing it. It's just going to keep adding more and more here. Like you're going to have an instance of it, another instance, another instance. So that's maybe like the most obvious one. The big thing here is you cannot really do debugging. So during your plugin development, because this code is not running at runtime, even if you are able to put a breakpoint, you won't know which line is giving an error. You have to guess it visually why it's not working, or like you are still going to get some errors here, but you're not going to have the luxury of setting breakpoints and seeing like what a variable's value is at a certain point, especially with for loops, that kind of thing. It's going to be really difficult to follow. So at this point, your best debugging option is the good old print statement. This always works. This is going to use the output area, and this is your best friend. I mean, if it's really too long, maybe you want to write it into a file and then check the logs, that kind of thing. So that's big. And also, as I mentioned, everything that I have shown tonight won't work 100% sure in Godot 4, and for good reasons, because other cool stuff is coming. So for the existing plugin developers, it's kind of bad news. They have to rewrite it or they have to change a lot of things. But that's life. I'm now ready to get your questions, and as usual, may your code run the first time.
I got no questions. That was actually helpful. And that one thing about having tool on top of every component was actually breaking my plugin for me. I did not realize it because it's just like I don't know, the documentation. The documentation is good. It's just I missed that part. I was like, why is this not working? Well, I give up and I did something else.
Yeah.
So I fixed that right now and it worked. Like this is a bug I've had for 3 months that I just left there. So thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for mentioning that too, because that is the most common problem I think with
Yeah.
this. People just forget the tool keyword.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
run
Right.
into it myself several times.
I forget it myself too, to be honest. When I'm creating, like during the development of this, like this is a massive plugin. It has so many like tabs, a lot of moving parts. I forget it plenty of times. So it happens. Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, I was going to say is I had it at my root, so that was working, but then I didn't have it in the subcomponent. So I have like a graph editor, which I'm going to show here shortly, where
Yeah.
I let you do like dialogue, like a dialogue tree maker.
Yeah, like this one.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. Yeah. So.
Cool. So yeah, you could be doing fancy things like this too. Like this almost feels like a game.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Is this presentation recorded
Yes.
or the slides? Okay, just want to make sure because I definitely would like to keep this out. I'll be right back. I'm so sorry.
Sure.
I wanted to thank you for running through all this stuff because I write a red load of Unity tools. I just have no idea how to approach it in Godot.
Ah,
But also, just for clarity, when you add the tool keyword at the top of a script,
yeah.
does it prevent, like, does it only run an editor, or do you still need to use those editor hints to figure out whether it's like runtime or
A
not?
tool script can run in both the editor and not in the editor.
That's
Okay,
the
thanks.
answer. Yes. So everything here is the same. So it's going to have the same functionality. This is the only thing that is required so that it functions without hitting this play button. It's as if it's sort of running in the engine without the engine running the game, but the engine is still running the code. I probably said the same thing in a very long way. So. Any other questions?
Just thank you for the presentation.
You're welcome.